A wealthy CEO accidentally falls for his secretary during a mistaken blind date, unaware that she works at his own company. Before we dive into the story, let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Enjoy the tale, everyone. Emma took a deep breath before stepping into the restaurant. She was trying to convince herself that her friend Lily's idea of a blind date wasn't so terrible. Running late, she hurried inside and spotted a man sitting alone at the back, wearing a white shirt, just as described in the message. As she approached, she noticed something unusual, a small cake with colorful frosting in the center of the table. Her heart melted instantly. How thoughtful, she thought. Without hesitation, she smiled and sat down. "Hi, you must be Daniel, right?" she said, adjusting her chair. "I can't believe you even remembered my birthday. How sweet of you to bring a cake." James looked up, startled by the sudden arrival of the young woman. Before he could correct her, Emma continued, "Wow, I've been on plenty of dates, but none have been this thoughtful. You've really impressed me." She laughed, leaning in to get a closer look at the cake. James stayed silent, observing the situation. He was there waiting for his assistant, Ryan, who was bringing the birthday guest his dog, Max. The cake, of course, was for the dog. But before he could explain, Emma picked up the knife. "Hope you don't mind, but I'm going to have a slice," she said, cutting the cake and taking a big bite. "Wow, this is amazing. Did you have it specially made?" James couldn't help but smile slightly, both at the confusion and her boldness. He decided not to interrupt. The moment was interrupted when Ryan arrived, holding Max, a small French bulldog wearing a blue birthday hat. Ryan froze, clearly confused to see Emma at the table. "Mr. James, sorry for the delay." Max was nervous about the hat, Ryan said, placing the dog on the chair next to James. Emma froze, still holding the fork. She glanced at the cake, then at the dog, and finally at Ryan and James. Reality hit her hard. The cake wasn't for her. Her face turned bright red. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry," she said, quickly standing up. "I think I sat at the wrong table." Ryan tried to stifle his laughter, while James simply nodded, still smiling. "Don't worry, it happens," James said, staying calm but clearly amused by the situation. Emma grabbed her bag and rushed out of the restaurant without looking back. As she disappeared through the door, James kept watching, intrigued. Her spontaneity and confidence had left an impression on him. James couldn't get Emma out of his mind. Who was she? And why did he feel so curious about this woman who had so unexpectedly entered his life? 2 days had passed since the awkward encounter at the restaurant, but for Emma, it felt like it had just happened. She couldn't shake the embarrassment of eating a dog's birthday cake in front of a stranger. Lily, of course, found the whole thing hilarious. At least it was memorable. "I bet he'll never forget your face," Lily joked while typing on her computer. "Yeah, memorable for being the woman who crashed his dog's birthday," Emma replied, rolling her eyes and trying to focus on her work. Emma worked at a large marketing firm, and her days were filled with tight deadlines, administrative tasks, and endless reports. Despite the chaos, she enjoyed the job. It was stable, something she needed to help support her ailing mother. That same day, the office was buzzing. Rumors were flying that the new CEO would start that morning. No one knew much about him, but there was a sense of anticipation in the air. Emma, however, was too busy to pay much attention. She was swamped with work. When the clock struck 9 a.m., the elevator in the center of the floor opened with a soft ding. Emma was standing near the door, holding a stack of documents, when she saw the man step out. She froze. It was him, James. He recognized her immediately, too. Their eyes met, and an awkward silence filled the air. Emma felt her face flush with embarrassment. He, on the other hand, seemed to suppress a smile. "Good morning," James said, his voice calm and professional as he walked past her toward the meeting room. Emma stood still for a few seconds, trying to process what had just happened. He was the new CEO. How was that possible? Feeling even more uneasy, she tried to focus on her tasks. Meanwhile, James entered the conference room and was greeted by his team. He was there to take over the company, and he knew his arrival came with high expectations. But deep down, his thoughts were still on the young woman from the restaurant. Later, back in his office, James called his assistant, Ryan. "Ryan, I need a personal secretary right away." Someone reliable who can manage my schedule and handle appointments. A few minutes later, Ryan appeared with a folder in hand. He placed it on the desk and opened it, revealing a series of detailed profiles with photos of company employees. These are the candidates who already work here and have the experience for the position, Ryan explained. James flipped through the pages, glancing casually at the photos, and resumes until one image caught his eye. He stopped immediately when he saw Emma's face. Her name was highlighted at the top of the profile, Emma Carter. He didn't need to read anything else. "I want her to be my secretary," James said, pointing at the photo. Ryan raised an eyebrow, surprised by the quick decision. "Understood, sir. I'll bring her to your office." Meanwhile, downstairs, Emma was reviewing a report when she got the call. "Emma, the new CEO wants to see you. Can you come to his office now?" the receptionist asked. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. Why would the new CEO want to see her? Still trying to process their brief elevator encounter, she adjusted her hair and headed upstairs. When the door to the CEO's office opened, there was James seated behind a large mahogany desk. Emma froze for a moment, her heart racing. Was he the new CEO? How was that possible? James looked at her and gestured for her to come in. "Please come in and have a seat, Miss Carter," he said, his tone calm and professional. Emma obeyed, doing her best to avoid eye contact. James kept his gaze fixed on her for a moment before continuing. "I need a personal secretary, someone who can organize my schedule and handle administrative tasks. I've heard excellent things about you, and I believe you're the perfect fit for the job," he explained. Emma felt a mix of surprise and discomfort. Working directly with James would mean facing the awkward memory of the restaurant every day. "Of course, sir. I'll do my best to meet your expectations," she replied, keeping her tone professional. James nodded, satisfied. "Great, consider yourself hired." Emma left the office, trying to manage the whirlwind of emotions. She needed the job, but how would she work alongside someone who had witnessed one of the most embarrassing moments of her life? While Emma wrestled with the idea of keeping things strictly professional, James seemed to have his own reasons for choosing her as his secretary. Reasons that might not have been entirely about her qualifications. Emma's routine changed quickly after she took on the new role. She was now responsible for organizing James's complex schedule, preparing detailed reports for important meetings, and closely tracking the CEO's activities. Despite her determination to remain professional, she couldn't ignore the growing tension she felt whenever she was near him. James, on the other hand, appeared calm and confident, but there was something different about the way he interacted with Emma. He treated her with an unusual kindness, something that didn't quite match his typically serious demeanor. A week after Emma started her new position, James stopped by her desk. "Miss Carter, I need you to accompany me to some external meetings this week. It's important for you to get familiar with our key clients," he said, handing her a list of appointments. Emma nodded, keeping her tone professional. "Of course, sir. I'll prepare the necessary documents." That same day, Emma and James attended their first meeting together. She noticed how confident and decisive he was, earning everyone's respect in the room. During the meeting, he occasionally glanced at her, as if gauging her reactions to the discussions. It made her a bit nervous, but she managed to stay composed. After the meeting, James suggested they have lunch together to discuss the next steps. Emma hesitated for a moment, but eventually agreed. "How are you adjusting to the new role?" he asked. James asked as he glanced over the menu. "It's challenging, but I'm learning a lot," Emma replied cautiously. "That's good. I enjoy working with people who can adapt to new challenges," James said with a faint smile. The lunch went smoothly, but Emma still felt uneasy about how close he was. Though she tried to focus on the work-related conversation, there was something about the way he looked at her that made her heart skip a beat. That evening, after a long day of meetings, James insisted on driving Emma home. "It's late, and you look exhausted. Please let me take you home," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Emma tried to decline, but eventually gave in. The car ride was quiet, but the silence was comfortable. When they arrived at her building, Emma opened the door and stepped out, only to twist her ankle. "Ouch!" she exclaimed, losing her balance. Before she could fall, James was by her side, holding her firmly. Are you okay? He asked, his voice filled with concern. Emma tried to brush it off, but the pain in her ankle was obvious. I think I twisted my ankle, but I'm fine. I can make it upstairs on my own. James ignored her protests and picked her up without hesitation. That's not up for discussion. I'm taking you to your apartment. Mr. Carter, you don't have to, Emma protested, but he was already carrying her up the stairs. When they reached her apartment door, Emma quickly unlocked it, still embarrassed by the situation. James gently placed her on the sofa and glanced around. You live alone? He asked as she massaged her ankle. I live with my mom, but she's in the hospital tonight, Emma replied, avoiding eye contact. James noticed the hesitation in her voice, but decided not to press further. I'll let you rest. We'll take a break from meetings tomorrow, so you can recover, he said before leaving. Emma stared at the door, feeling strangely protected, but also confused by his behavior. The next day, James approached her desk with a more serious expression. I've been thinking about your workload. I know you're working hard, but I need you to take better care of yourself. I don't want you overdoing it, he said, looking directly into her eyes. Emma felt her face flush. She hadn't expected to hear that, especially from someone who was usually so direct and demanding. Thank you, sir. I'll try to balance things better, she replied, unsure of what else to say. As he walked away, James seemed satisfied with her response, but Emma knew this closeness was starting to complicate things. She needed to find a way to maintain professional boundaries, even though her heart was beginning to say otherwise. The tension between them grew every day, but Emma knew that getting involved with James would be a mistake she couldn't afford to make. Yet, it seemed increasingly difficult to resist the man who made her question all her rules. The relationship between Emma and James continued to evolve in unexpected ways. Despite maintaining a professional demeanor, Emma couldn't avoid the moments when James's gaze seemed to pierce through her, as if he wanted to uncover all her secrets. She knew she needed to keep an emotional distance, but his kind gestures and attention constantly disarmed her. One quiet afternoon at the office, Emma was reviewing the schedule for the following week when Lily appeared with 2 cups of coffee. Gossip break, Lily said, pushing a cup toward her. Emma smiled, accepting the coffee. Lily was always a ray of sunshine amidst the chaos of work. So, how's it working with Mr. CEO? Lily laughed. Is he as intimidating as they say? Emma hesitated, but then chuckled. He's not intimidating. He's demanding but fair, and surprisingly kind sometimes. Kind? Lily raised an eyebrow. That sounds interesting. Emma rolled her eyes, but before she could respond, Ryan appeared. Miss Carter, Mr. Carter wants to see you in his office immediately. Emma sighed and put her cup down, getting up. When she entered James's office, she found him standing by the window, lost in thought. He turned when he heard the door close. Emma, I need you to accompany me to a social event on Friday night. It's an important meeting with investors, and it would be helpful to have someone assist me with the presentations. Of course, sir. I'll organize everything necessary for the event, she replied, keeping her tone professional. Oh, and James hesitated, something unusual for him. I need you to pretend to be my girlfriend during the event. Emma blinked, confused. Your girlfriend? James took a deep breath before explaining. My ex-girlfriend Vanessa will be there. She's persistent. I want to avoid any awkward or unnecessary situations. It's just for one night. Emma remained silent for a few seconds. She hadn't expected that request, but it was hard to turn him down. All right, if it's necessary, I'll do it, but I don't want any payment for it, she said firmly. James seemed surprised by her response, but nodded. Very well. Thank you for this, Emma. Friday came quickly, and Emma felt a flutter of nerves as she prepared for the event. She wore an elegant dress borrowed from Lily, who insisted on helping her get ready. When James arrived to pick her up, he paused for a moment, seemingly surprised by her appearance. You look stunning, he said, his voice lower and softer than usual. Emma smiled shyly as they got into the car. At the event, Emma played her role perfectly, smiling and interacting with the guests. However, it wasn't long before Vanessa approached. James, what a pleasant surprise, she said with a fake smile before turning to Emma. And this is? Emma, my girlfriend, James said firmly, taking Emma's hand. Vanessa looked Emma up and down, clearly trying to intimidate her. How interesting. Well, I hope you both enjoy the evening, she said before walking away. James lightly squeezed Emma's hand, as if to reassure her. Later, as they were heading back home, James decided to drop Emma off at her apartment again. On the way, he commented, "You were incredible tonight. Thank you for helping me with everything." Emma smiled, feeling a bit more at ease. "It was my pleasure, Mr. Carter." When they arrived, Emma stepped out of the car and thanked him again. However, as she tried to walk quickly, she stumbled. James caught her by the waist, holding her steady. "You really need to watch where you're going," he teased with a genuine smile. Emma laughed, her heart racing. But in that moment, something in James's eyes seemed different, as though he wanted to say something more. Before he could, she thanked him again and headed up to her apartment. Let's have some fun with those who only read the comments. Type pizza in the comments. Only those who make it this far will understand. Now, let's continue the story. The next morning, James arrived at the office as usual, but there was something different about him. He seemed more introspective. During the daily meeting, he occasionally glanced at Emma, making her uneasy, though she pretended not to notice. Shortly after lunch, Ryan walked into Emma's office with an envelope in hand. "Emma, Mr. Carter asked that you deliver this personally to the finance department. He said it's urgent," Ryan informed her in his usual professional tone. Emma took the envelope and headed to the lower floor. While waiting for the elevator, she overheard familiar voices. Two women from the administrative team were talking about the previous night. "Did you see Mr. Carter with that woman at the event? They make an interesting couple, don't you think?" one said. "Interesting is a polite way to put it. He could be with someone much more suitable for his position, don't you think?" the other replied, laughing. Emma felt her stomach turn. She knew many people thought she wasn't a good match for someone like James. But why did it bother her so much? He wasn't her real boyfriend after all. The day dragged on, and Emma tried to focus on her work. Late in the afternoon, James appeared at her desk. "Emma, I need you to accompany me to an off-site meeting tomorrow. It's with an important client, and your assistance will be crucial," he said, handing her a folder with information. "Of course, sir, I'll prepare everything necessary," she replied, keeping her tone professional. The next day, Emma and James attended the meeting together. During the drive, James seemed more relaxed, sharing some ideas for future projects. Emma took the opportunity to jot down notes, but couldn't help smiling at some of his more casual comments. The meeting went well, and Emma felt her work was being recognized. At the end of the day, James suggested stopping at a nearby cafe for dinner before heading back to the office. "You deserve a break after today. And honestly, I'd rather eat here than deal with traffic right now," he said casually. Emma hesitated, but eventually agreed. Over dinner, they talked about work, but the conversation also drifted to more personal topics. Emma shared a bit about her childhood and mentioned her mother, who was ill. James, in turn, briefly opened up about how he had taken over the company under unexpected circumstances. "My mom means everything to me. I'm doing my best to take care of her," Emma said softly. "She's always supported me, even when things got tough." James looked at her more closely, as if seeing beyond her professional facade. He realized there was much more to Emma than he had initially thought. After a quiet dinner, James offered to take Emma to the hospital where her mom was staying. On the way, he noticed the tension on her face and how her restless hands gripped the seatbelt. Emma was clearly worried but remained silent. When they arrived, Emma tried to say goodbye quickly, but James insisted on accompanying her to the room. "You kept me company at dinner. It's only fair I return the favor. I want to make sure everything is okay with your mom," he said with a reassuring smile. Reluctantly, Emma agreed, and they walked through the hospital corridors until they reached the room. When they entered, Emma saw her mom, Margaret, lying in bed, sleeping deeply. The machines around her made soft, rhythmic beeps, indicating everything was stable. "She just had surgery. She's recovering well, but still needs time to rest," Emma explained, adjusting Margaret's blanket. James watched in silence, respecting the moment. After a few seconds, he gently touched Emma's shoulder. "I'll leave you two alone. If you need anything, please call me. I'll be around." Emma nodded, thanking him with a shy smile. As soon as James left, Margaret began to stir in bed, slowly opening her eyes. Emma, she called, her voice weak. I'm here, Mom, Emma replied, holding her hand. Margaret looked around, confused, and then seemed to remember something. Who is that man with you? He seems special. Is he your boyfriend? Emma froze. She knew how much her mom pressured her to start dating and live her life instead of working so much. Unable to think of a quick excuse, Emma responded impulsively. Yes, Mom, he's my boyfriend. Margaret's face lit up with a radiant smile, clearly thrilled. Finally, dear, I knew you would find someone good. He seems wonderful. Emma just smiled, trying not to show her discomfort. After a few minutes, Margaret fell back asleep and Emma sat by her side, trying to process what she had just done. The next morning, Emma asked James to meet for coffee at a small cafe near the office. He seemed surprised by the invitation but accepted without hesitation. While they sat at a table by the window, Emma took a deep breath before speaking. I need to tell you something, she began, not looking directly at him. My mom saw you at the hospital yesterday, and I ended up telling her you were my boyfriend. James was silent for a moment, but didn't seem surprised. He just raised an eyebrow, curious. And why did you say that? He asked calmly. Emma nervously fidgeted with her coffee cup as she explained. My mom is always pressuring me to date and stop focusing only on work. She's sick, and I didn't want to disappoint her. So, I said it without thinking. James leaned forward slightly, his eyes fixed on hers. And what do you want me to do? He asked, a slight smile on his lips. I wanted to ask if you could pretend to be my boyfriend, just while she's in the hospital. I don't want her to worry about me. Emma looked nervous but relieved to finally say what she needed to. To her surprise, James didn't hesitate. Of course, Emma. If it will help you and your mom, I'll do it. Emma looked at him, surprised and grateful. Thank you, James. I really appreciate it. In the following days, James played his part perfectly. He visited the hospital with Emma, always attentive and caring, easily winning Margaret's affection. To Margaret, James seemed like the ideal son-in-law, and she didn't hide her joy at seeing her daughter dating. Between hospital visits and work, James and Emma began to spend more time together. He made her laugh with stories from his childhood, and she impressed him with her intelligence and determination. Even though their arrangement was just a facade, the two began to form a genuine connection. One night, as they returned from a hospital visit, James stopped in front of Emma's apartment and walked her to the door as he always did. But this time, before she could enter, he gently grabbed her arm. Emma, wait! She turned surprised. James's eyes were fixed on hers, more intense than ever. Before she could say anything, he leaned in and kissed her. Gently and suddenly, Emma froze at first, but soon found herself returning to kiss, momentarily forgetting everything around her. When they finally pulled away, James looked at her with a mix of seriousness and vulnerability. I know this is just an arrangement, but it's getting hard to pretend, he admitted. Emma didn't know how to respond. Her mind was in turmoil, and her heart was racing. She stepped into her apartment without saying another word, leaving James at the door, lost in his own thoughts about what had just happened. The next morning, Emma arrived at the office earlier than usual. She needed time to process what had happened the night before. James's kiss lingered in her mind, stirring up a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She couldn't deny how connected she had felt in that moment, but it also complicated everything. James, on the other hand, seemed calmer than ever. When he entered the office, he greeted Emma with his usual smile, though there was something different in his gaze, as if he wanted to say something but was waiting for the right moment. The day dragged on as they both avoided mentioning the kiss. Emma tried to focus on work, but James's occasional glances were impossible to ignore. At the end of the day, Emma was eager to leave, hoping for some mental relief after days of tension. However, as she exited the main doors of the building, she was caught off guard. Two men were waiting for her on the sidewalk, wearing worn-out jackets and looking impatient. Emma immediately recognized them. They were the same men she had borrowed money from to pay for her mother's surgery. Miss Carter, we've been waiting far too long for that payment, one of them said, crossing his arms. You know our patience only goes so far, right? The other added, his tone menacing. Emma took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Please, just a little more time. I'm so close to getting the money. I just need a few more days, she replied, her voice trembling slightly. Unbeknownst to her, James had just exited the side entrance of the building and overheard the conversation. He stayed back, watching the scene unfold. Emma's words echoed in his mind. I'm so close to getting the money. Pieces began to fall into place for him. Their meeting at the restaurant, her sudden involvement in his work, and now this suspicious exchange. Was it all part of a plan to take advantage of his position and wealth? After a few curt words of parting, the men walked away, leaving Emma visibly relieved. James, without revealing that he had heard everything, got into his car. On his way home, his mind was racing. Was her sitting at my table that day really a coincidence? Was this all planned from the start? He recalled the genuine connection he felt with Emma, but now doubt clouded every memory. The weight of his suspicions grew with each passing moment. The next morning, Emma arrived at the office early again. When she saw James walk in, she offered him a timid smile. Good morning, Mr. Carter, she said softly. To her surprise, he walked past her without even looking at her. His indifference left her confused and uneasy. Throughout the day, James remained distant, speaking to her only when necessary and in a cold, detached tone. Emma felt the tension mounting with every hour. By the end of the day, unable to bear the silence any longer, Emma decided to confront him. She knocked on his office door and entered before he could respond. Excuse me, Mr. Carter, I need to talk to you, she said, folding her arms to mask her anxiety. James looked up at her, his face a mask of indifference. What is it, Emma? I'm busy, he replied curtly. Emma frowned. This wasn't like him. Is everything okay? You've been acting strange all day. Did I do something wrong? James let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. Something wrong? Let's see, Emma. Do you think sitting at a stranger's table today we met was just a coincidence? Or was it a carefully planned strategy? What are you implying? She asked, her voice trembling. James stood, placing his hands on the desk and locking eyes with her. I'm saying you only got close to me because you knew who I was, because you knew I was wealthy and could help with your problems. This was all planned, wasn't it? Emma froze, stunned by his words. Do you really believe that? She asked, her voice cracking. What else am I supposed to believe? Last night, I heard you talking to two men, begging for more time to get the money. What am I supposed to think, Emma? He said, his voice now louder, mixing anger and disappointment. Do you really think I'm that kind of person? That I could manipulate someone like that? She replied, tears threatening to fall. I don't know what to think anymore. All I see is a story that makes sense. And honestly, I'm tired of being fooled by good intentions that turn out to be lies, James retorted. Emma clenched her fists, trying to control the pain and anger rising in her throat. She knew explaining her situation at that moment would be useless. He had already made up his mind. I never expected you to think so little of me. But if that's what you believe, there's nothing I can do to change your mind, she said, her voice low and controlled. I expected more from you, James. Without waiting for a response, Emma turned and left the room, closing the door harder than she intended. As she walked down the hallway, tears finally streamed down her face. After Emma left, James sat in his chair. As much as he wanted to be right about his suspicions, something about the way she reacted deeply bothered him. The hurt in her eyes seemed too real to be faked. He ran his hands through his hair, trying to organize his thoughts. Later, Ryan entered the room to deliver some reports. Noticing James's expression, he hesitated before speaking. Sir, you seem worried. Is something wrong? James shook his head but ended up opening up. Emma, there's something that doesn't make sense. I don't know if I'm being fair or making a mistake. Ryan, who knew a bit about Emma's story, decided to speak. Sir, if I may, Emma is one of the most dedicated people I know. She works hard to take care of her mom, and I've never seen her ask anyone for anything. If you think she has ulterior motives, it might be worth reconsidering. Those words echoed in James's mind. What if he was wrong? What if he had judged Emma unfairly? He knew he needed answers, but he feared he had already caused irreparable damage. Emma arrived early at the office the next morning, but the pain from James's accusations was still fresh in her mind. Despite being hurt, she decided to focus on work and avoid any personal interaction with him. Her priority was to protect her dignity, even if it meant dealing with the growing distance between them. James, on the other hand, spent the entire night tossing and turning. The conversation with Ryan and memories of the moments he had shared with Emma left him increasingly restless. What if he was wrong? What if, instead of uncovering a lie, he had pushed away the one person who really mattered to him? Mid-morning, while James was reviewing some documents in his office, Ryan entered hesitantly. "Sir, I hope I'm not disturbing you, but there's something I think you should know." James looked up, frowning. "What is it, Ryan?" Ryan hesitated for a moment, but decided to continue. "It's about Emma. I don't know what happened between you two, but I know she's been facing a lot of challenges. She doesn't like to talk about it, but her mom recently went through a complicated surgery and she managed everything on her own, without asking anyone for help." Ryan's words made James's stomach churn. He remembered Emma's kindness, the way she cared for her mom, and began to hate himself for not considering that before judging her. "Go on," James requested, his voice lower. "I heard rumors that she borrowed money to cover medical expenses. I know she's struggling to pay off that debt, but she's never used it as an excuse to ask for anything from the company or from you. She's a proud person, sir. Maybe it's important to consider that before jumping to conclusions." James sank into his chair. He felt the weight of his actions, realizing he had made a terrible mistake. At the end of the day, James decided he needed to talk to Emma. He knew that apologizing was only the first step, but it was necessary. He waited until the workday ended and went to her desk, but found the space empty. Determined, he went to the hospital, where he knew her mom was staying. When he arrived, he saw Emma sitting in the waiting room, her head resting in her hands. She looked exhausted physically and emotionally. He hesitated for a moment, but took a deep breath and walked up to her. "Emma," he called, his voice soft. She looked up, surprised to see him there. Her expression immediately hardened. "What are you doing here?" she asked coldly. James sat next to her, feeling the weight of the moment. "I came to apologize. I realized I was unfair to you." Emma crossed her arms, trying to maintain her composure. "Unfair is a kind way to describe what you did, James. You accused me of something terrible without even trying to understand the truth." "I know, and I regret it," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "I was wrong, and I have no excuses. I overheard bits of a conversation and jumped to conclusions. But please, let me make it right." Emma stayed silent, watching him. There was pain in her eyes, but also a glimmer of something deeper. Something James hoped was the connection they had before. "Do you know how hard it is to be accused of something you didn't do?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I would never do what you thought." "Never?" James nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "I know that now, and I'll do whatever it takes to show you how sorry I am, Emma. Just tell me how." In the days that followed, James made every effort to show Emma he was determined to make amends. He started with small gestures, helping her with reports, ensuring she had time to visit her mother in the hospital, and even bringing her coffee in the mornings. Let's play a little game with those who only read the comments. Type Coca-Cola in the comments. Only those who read this far will understand. Now back to the story. Emma, hesitant at first, began to notice the sincerity in his actions. Gradually, her anger gave way to cautious hope. Maybe James really was sorry. One afternoon, while they were working on an important presentation, James paused and looked at her. "Emma, I just want you to know that I don't need any proof of your honesty. I trust you, and I'm sorry I didn't before." Emma looked at him, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice. She knew James wasn't the kind of person to admit mistakes easily, and that meant more to her than he could realize. "I believe you, James, but it's going to take time to rebuild what was broken," she said honestly. James nodded, accepting her words. "I'm willing to wait as long as it takes." Though the apology was an important step, Emma still remained cautious. But there was something undeniable growing between them again, something that even James's mistake couldn't erase. James spent the next few days reflecting on their conversation at the hospital. The weight of his mistake lingered in his mind. He knew he had hurt someone who had only shown kindness and dedication. Every action Emma had taken, even before the misunderstanding, now seemed full of meaning. She was genuine, something rare in his world of appearances and ulterior motives. Emma, on the other hand, felt conflicted. While she wanted to believe James's remorse was genuine, his words still echoed in her mind, and the wound left by his distrust ran deep. She tried to focus on work and caring for her mother, but the weight of their confrontation lingered. The next morning, Emma arrived at the office and found James in the break room. He held 2 cups of coffee, and when he saw her, he offered one. She hesitated for a moment, but accepted it. "Thank you," she said, her tone reserved but polite. "I know I have a long way to go to earn your trust back," James began, his voice low and serious. "But I want you to know I won't stop trying to fix this." Emma didn't respond immediately. She took a sip of coffee, letting the warm aroma comfort her before looking at him. "Fixing things is about more than words, James. It's about actions," she said plainly. He nodded, taking the challenge in her words. James knew he had to prove, through consistent actions, that he was committed to rebuilding the bridge between them. That afternoon, as they reviewed a presentation together, Emma noticed that James was unusually quiet. He seemed hesitant, as though he wanted to say something. Finally, he broke the silence. "Emma, can I ask you a question?" he said cautiously, almost vulnerably. She looked at him, raising her eyebrows. "Sure. Why didn't you ask for help? I mean, you're so strong. You always handle everything on your own, but sometimes asking for help isn't a sign of weakness. It's just human." The question caught her off guard. She stayed silent for a few seconds, searching for the right words. "I think asking for help has always been hard for me, especially because people often confuse it with dependency or inability. I wanted to show that I could solve my problems on my own. It's always been that way." James nodded, as if he was finally understanding something essential about her. The silence between them was no longer uncomfortable. It was filled with mutual understanding. When the workday ended, James walked with Emma to the elevator. She hesitated before pressing the button to go down, looking at him. "I know you're trying, James, and I appreciate it," she said with a softer tone than before. The small smile she gave before the doors closed warmed James's heart. It was a small step, but a significant one. In the days that followed, James continued to show his sincerity through simple and thoughtful gestures. He made sure Emma had all the support she needed at work, but he also respected her space. For Emma, it was hard not to notice his genuine effort. Slowly, the coldness she had felt began to melt away. One evening, after a long day at the office, James suggested they have dinner together to discuss some project ideas. Emma agreed, and they went to a quiet little restaurant away from the city's hustle and bustle. During dinner, the conversation was light and relaxed. For the first time in weeks, Emma felt comfortable around him again. They laughed about past stories, and James even shared a bit about his own life, something he rarely did. When he dropped her off at home, he stood at the door for a few seconds, as if wanting to say something, but decided against it. Emma entered her apartment feeling different. Maybe, just maybe, she could start trusting him again. James, on the other hand, knew this was only the beginning of his journey to win Emma back, but for the first time he felt there was hope, although the wound from the misunderstanding was not completely healed. Both felt that the first step towards overcoming it had been taken. The next morning, when Emma arrived at the office, she found a message from James on her desk. It was an invitation to join him for a meeting with an important new client that afternoon. She hesitated, but knew it was part of her duties as his personal assistant. "You accepted the invitation, right?" asked Lily, approaching with a coffee in hand. Emma shrugged. "I don't have many options. It's work." Lily raised an eyebrow, analyzing her closely. "Work? Sure. But don't pretend you don't like the attention. He's clearly trying to make things right. That doesn't change what happened, Lily. He doubted me in a way I never imagined, and that hurts." Lily nodded, understanding. "Just remember that no one is perfect. Sometimes people make mistakes, but what's important is what they do after that. If he's trying, maybe it's worth hearing him out." Emma pondered her friend's words as she prepared for the meeting. Later, James came to her desk, and they went to the meeting location together. In the car, the atmosphere was quiet, but not uncomfortable. James, however, seemed nervous, as if trying to find the right words. Emma, He began while driving. I know there's still a lot to be said between us, but I want you to know that I'm here, ready to listen when you're ready. Emma looked at him for a moment, evaluating the sincerity in his eyes. Although she wasn't ready for a deeper conversation yet, his words touched her. Thank you for saying that, James. But for now, I think we should focus on work. He nodded, respecting her decision. The meeting was a success. Emma was impressed with James's ability to handle clients and close deals. It was easy to forget sometimes why he was in that position. His determination and charisma were undeniable. When they left, he surprised her by suggesting they stop for dinner. It was a long day. I think we deserve a break before heading home, he said with a smile. Emma hesitated but agreed. During dinner, the conversation flowed naturally. James seemed more relaxed, and Emma couldn't help but feel at ease listening to his stories and funny comments about work. As they walked back to the car, James suddenly stopped and looked at her. Emma, I know you still have reasons to doubt me, but I want you to know that I'm trying to be a better person for you. His words caught her by surprise. Emma felt her heart race, but didn't know how to respond. Instead, she looked away, gathering the strength to keep her composure. In the following days, James's gestures continued, small but meaningful. He made a point of being attentive to her needs, whether by lightening her workload or offering help with everyday challenges. Although Emma remained cautious, something in her attitude began to shift. She noticed that despite the mistake he had made, James was genuinely trying to make amends. One evening, as they reviewed a project together at the office, James approached her hesitantly. Emma was focused on the documents, but she noticed his presence and looked up. Can I ask you something? He said cautiously. Of course, she replied, curious. James took a deep breath before continuing. Why didn't you give up on me? After everything that happened, why are you still here, giving me a chance to fix things? Emma was silent for a moment, reflecting on the question. Finally, she answered honestly. I guess it's because I saw something in you, James. Even after everything, I believe you're not just the man who judged me unfairly. You're more than that. James felt a wave of relief and emotion at her words. He leaned slightly forward as if wanting to be closer to her, but stopped, respecting the boundaries still between them. Emma looked away, nervous, but there was a small smile on her lips. As she left the room, James realized that, for the first time in weeks, there was a glimmer of hope in his relationship with Emma. He knew there was still much to do, but he was ready to do whatever it took to regain her trust. Their connection, though fragile, seemed to be growing stronger again. Both of them understood they were on an uncertain journey, but neither was willing to give up. James continued his efforts to regain Emma's trust. Knowing it would be a long road, he observed her from a distance, noticing that she was beginning to let her guard down, though something still held her back. Emma, meanwhile, tried to focus on work and keep her feelings in check. Despite all of James's gestures, the wound caused by his distrust lingered deeply. One afternoon, while Emma was working at her desk, she was interrupted by Olivia, a competitive and somewhat cruel colleague. Oh, Emma, you really know how to use your special skills to climb up in a company, don't you? Olivia said with a venomous smile. Emma stopped typing and looked at Olivia, confused. What are you talking about, Olivia? Staying close to the boss? Playing that good girl act? It seems to work. Who knows how far you can go with it? Olivia continued, her voice dripping with malice. Olivia's words cut through Emma like a knife. Before she could respond, James turned the corner and overheard the conversation. He quickly approached, his eyes locked on Olivia. Olivia, care to explain what's happening here? James asked firmly. Olivia froze, realizing he was there. Nothing, Mr. Carter. They drove for about an hour, and Sophia couldn't help but notice the scenic route they were taking. Where exactly are we going? She asked, glancing at William. He smiled but kept his eyes on the road. You'll see. It's a surprise. Sophia raised an eyebrow but decided to play along. She trusted him, and the idea of a surprise was intriguing. Eventually, they arrived at a small, picturesque vineyard nestled in the countryside. The rolling hills were covered in rows of grapevines, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers. Sophia's eyes widened as she took in the view. William, this is beautiful. What are we doing here? He turned to her, his smile warm. I thought you could use a break from the city, and I wanted to show you something special. They got out of the car, and William led her through the vineyard, explaining how it was one of the company's partners. We've been working with them for years, but I've never brought anyone here before, he admitted. Sophia felt a flutter in her chest. The gesture was thoughtful, and it reminded her of how much William had been trying to make things right between them. As they walked, they talked about everything, work, life, and even their dreams for the future. For the first time in a long while, Sophia felt completely at ease. The weight of her responsibilities seemed to lift, even if just for a moment. William's presence was calming, and she realized how much she had come to rely on him. After a tour of the vineyard, they sat down for a wine tasting. The owner, a friendly older man named Marco, joined them and shared stories about the history of the vineyard. Sophia found herself laughing and enjoying the conversation, something she hadn't done in a while. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, William turned to Sophia. I wanted to bring you here because I wanted you to see that there's more to life than just work and stress. You deserve moments like this, Sophia. Moments where you can just breathe and be happy. Sophia looked at him, her heart swelling with emotion. Thank you, William. This means a lot to me. He reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. You mean a lot to me, too? The drive back to the city was quiet, but comfortable. Sophia felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. When they arrived at her apartment, William walked her to the door. I had a great time today, she said, smiling up at him. Me too, he replied, his gaze soft. I'm glad you enjoyed it. There was a moment of hesitation before he leaned in and kissed her gently. It was a kiss full of promise and affection, and Sophia felt her heart skip a beat. When they pulled away, William brushed a strand of hair from her face. Good night, Sophia. Good night, William, she whispered, watching as he walked back to his car. The next morning, Sophia arrived at the office feeling refreshed and energized. She was greeted by Chloe, who immediately noticed the change in her demeanor. Someone's in a good mood, Chloe teased, winking. Sophia laughed. I had a nice day yesterday, that's all. Chloe raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. As the day went on, Sophia found herself smiling more often, and even William seemed lighter, as if the weight of their past misunderstandings had finally lifted. A few days later, William surprised Sophia again, this time with tickets to a charity gala. I thought it would be a good opportunity for us to spend time together outside of work, he explained. Sophia was hesitant at first, unsure if she was ready for such a public event, but William reassured her. It's just us, Sophia. No pressure, no expectations. Just a night to enjoy each other's company. She agreed, and as the night of the gala approached, she found herself looking forward to it. The evening was magical. Sophia wore a stunning dress that made her feel confident, and William couldn't take his eyes off her. They danced, laughed, and talked, completely lost in each other's company. For the first time, Sophia allowed herself to fully embrace the idea of being with William, without the shadow of doubt hanging over them. As the night came to an end, William took her hand and led her to a quiet corner of the venue. Sophia, I know we've been through a lot, but I want you to know that I'm all in. I want to be with you, not just as your boss or your friend, but as someone who truly cares about you. Sophia felt tears well up in her eyes. William, I feel the same way. I've been so scared to let myself trust again, but with you, it feels different. It feels right. He smiled, pulling her into a gentle embrace. Then let's take this step together, Sophia. No more walls, no more doubts. Just us. From that moment on, their relationship deepened. They continued to navigate the challenges of work and life, but now they did it as a team. Sophia found herself opening up more, sharing her fears and dreams with William, and he did the same. They supported each other in ways neither of them had expected, and their bond grew stronger with each passing day. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of Sophia's apartment, watching the city lights, William turned to her. Sophia, I know we've come a long way, but I want you to know that I'm committed to making this work. You're the most important person in my life, and I'll do whatever it takes to keep you happy. Sophia smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. You already make me happy, William. More than I ever thought possible. They sat in comfortable silence, the world around them fading away as they focused on the connection they had built. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was enough. In the car, James seemed more introspective than usual, but also relaxed. He drove her to a remote vineyard surrounded by rolling green hills and a flawless blue sky. "Is this the partner?" Emma asked, surprised by the breathtaking view. James smiled, opening the car door for her. "Not exactly. This place is special to me. I wanted to share it with you." Emma was speechless as they walked through the vines. They sat at a reserved table on the terrace, where a small lunch awaited them. Emma couldn't hide her curiosity. "Why did you bring me here?" James looked at her, serious but with a hint of vulnerability. "This place reminds me that life is about choices. I always come here when I need clarity, and lately, all I can think about is how much I want you to be a part of my life." Emma's heart raced. Before she could respond, a waiter arrived with 2 glasses of wine, interrupting the moment. She used the pause to process what she had just heard. As they enjoyed lunch, James shared stories about his childhood, moments he rarely revealed to anyone. Emma realized that behind the confident CEO was a man full of layers she was still discovering. When they returned to the office later that afternoon, Emma felt closer to James than ever. However, the reality of their work environment quickly caught up with them. The next day, an important meeting with investors put them on opposing sides. During the presentation, Emma challenged some of James's ideas, proposing bolder alternatives. Although the discussion remained professional, there was tension in the air. After the meeting, James called Emma into his office. You could have told me about your ideas before the meeting, right?" he said, trying to sound firm. "And lose the spontaneity? I thought you liked challenges," Emma replied, teasing him slightly. James studied her for a moment before smiling. "I do, but you caught me off guard, and that rarely happens." They laughed together, easing the tension. Work had always been important to both of them, but they were learning to balance their personal and professional lives in a unique way. Later that day, an unexpected incident shook Emma's world. She got a call from Lily, who was at the hospital. "Emma, you need to come now. Your mom's condition has worsened." Lily's voice was serious. Emma dropped everything and rushed to the hospital. James, noticing her urgency, insisted on going with her. At the hospital, Margaret was stable, but the doctors explained that her condition would require extra attention in the coming months. Emma tried to stay calm, but silent tears fell as she listened to the instructions. James held her hand the whole time without saying a word. After the doctors left, he looked at Emma, who was visibly shaken. "I'm here, Emma. You don't have to go through this alone." Emma hugged him, finding comfort in his presence. James seemed to be the anchor she needed at that moment. In the following days, James took an even more active role in her life. He helped adjust Emma's work schedule, organize hospital visits, and did everything he could to lighten her load. This didn't go unnoticed by Lily, who made sure to comment. "He really loves you, It's not every day you find someone like that." Emma didn't know how to respond. Although James's actions spoke volumes, she still struggled with the fear of depending on someone. But one night, while they were reviewing some papers at the office, James broke the silence. "Emma, I know things have been tough, but I want you to know I'm here no matter what. I want to be your foundation, your strength when you need it." Emma looked at him, her eyes shining with a mix of emotion and gratitude. "I never imagined someone would do so much for me, for us." James moved closer, gently touching her face. "You deserve all of this and more, Emma." This time she took the first step. Emma kissed him, slowly and meaningfully. When they pulled apart, they both knew something had changed. They weren't just trying to find balance anymore. They were building something together, something neither of them could have predicted. Let's play a joke on those who only read the comments. Type milkshake in the comments. Only those who get this far will understand. Now, let's continue the story. That night as they left the office, hand in hand, Emma felt that, for the first time in a long time, the pieces of her life were finally falling into place. In the days that followed, the relationship between Emma and James continued to grow stronger. His presence during her most difficult moments made her feel something she had long forgotten: security. Still, Emma knew that the balance between her personal and professional life was delicate, especially since their relationship was the subject of glances and whispers at the office. One afternoon, while Emma was working on an urgent project, Lily approached her discreetly. "There's something you need to know," Lily said, lowering her voice. "Olivia is spreading rumors that you are getting special treatment because of James." Emma sighed, already expecting this kind of comment. "That's not surprising, Lily. She's always seen me as a threat, even before James." "True, but now she's trying to convince other colleagues. It seems she wants to make you feel isolated," Lily continued. Emma tried to stay calm, but Lily's words hit hard. She didn't want her relationship with James to harm her professional reputation. She decided she needed to be proactive. Later that day, Emma went to James's office. "We need to talk," she said, closing the door behind her. James looked at her, intrigued. "About what?" "About how our relationship is being viewed here. Some people are spreading rumors, and it could hurt my professional credibility." James grew serious, standing up from his chair. "Who's doing this?" "It doesn't matter who James. The point is, I want to handle this on my own. I need to show that I'm here for my work, not because of what we have." James hesitated for a moment before agreeing. "I understand your position. But know that if you need me, I'm here. Always." Emma nodded, appreciating his support, but knew she had to face this on her own. That same night, something unexpected happened. While James was reviewing documents at home, he received a call from his personal security. "Mr. Carter, the men you paid to leave Ms. Carter alone are lurking around again. We thought you should know." James felt anger boiling inside him. He had already dealt with this issue, but just knowing they were still around unsettled him. Without hesitation, he instructed that they be closely monitored. The next day, during work hours, James called Emma into his office. "I need to ask you something. Have you noticed anything strange lately? Anyone bothering you outside the office?" he asked directly. Emma frowned, puzzled. "No. Why are you asking?" James hesitated before responding. "I just want to make sure you're safe." Emma could tell he was hiding something, but decided not to press him. She knew James had a tendency to try to protect her at all costs, even when she didn't want him to. Later that day, as he left the office, James decided to confront the men again. He found them at a rundown bar downtown. When he walked in, they recognized him immediately and tried to justify their presence. "Mr. Carter, we don't want trouble. We're just here for a job, nothing to do with Miss Carter," one of them said. James interrupted, his voice firm and controlled. "I'll say this only once. I don't want to see you near Emma or her mother again. If I do, the consequences will be much more serious than just a conversation." "Understood." The men quickly nodded, clearly intimidated. James left, feeling like he had put an end to the matter, but he knew he needed to be honest with Emma. 2 days later, Emma noticed something different about James. He seemed worried, as if carrying a burden. Determined to find out what was going on, she went to his office at the end of the day. "James, what's going on?" "You've been acting strange lately," she said, closing the door behind her. James looked at her, clearly hesitant. Finally, he sighed. "I went to see those men who were bothering you again. I found out they'd been hanging around, and I wanted to make sure they wouldn't trouble you anymore." Emma froze, processing his words. Her first reaction was surprise, but frustration quickly followed. "You did this again without telling me?" she asked, her voice rising slightly. "I did it because I care, Emma. They were a threat to you and your mother. I couldn't just ignore it," James replied, trying to justify his actions. "I don't need you handling everything for me," she shot back. "I can deal with my own problems, James. This isn't about you, it's about me." Her tone made him realize he'd crossed the line. "I understand, Emma, but I can't just stand by and do nothing when you're in danger," he said sincerely. Silence filled the room. Both were visibly shaken. But something shifted in that moment. Emma realized that, despite disagreeing with James's approach, he was acting out of genuine care. She took a deep breath, trying to calm down. "I just need you to trust me, James. I don't want to feel like I'm dependent on you for everything." James stepped closer, gently taking her hands. "I do trust you, Emma. I just want to be someone you can rely on, without needing to ask. Emma looked at him, emotion welling up inside her. Before she could respond, James leaned in and kissed her, a gesture full of tenderness and understanding. This time, the kiss wasn't just a moment of passion, but a bridge built after conflict. When they pulled apart, James smiled. I think we need to learn how to handle our differences, but I don't want them to push us apart. I want this to work. Emma nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. Then let's make it work together. They embraced, knowing that, despite the challenges, they were stronger than ever. After all, they were learning that true love is built in moments of conflict, but strengthened in those of understanding. The months that followed were a mix of challenges and hope for Emma and James. Between caring for Margaret and the intense pace of work, their relationship blossomed, proving to be stronger with each passing day. Then one afternoon, Emma received the call she had been waiting for. Mrs. Carter, I have good news, the doctor said over the phone. Your mother is recovering very well. We can discharge her from the hospital in the next few days. Emma felt immense relief. Tears of happiness welled up instantly, but this time they were tears of pure joy. As soon as she hung up, she ran to James's office. He was focused at his desk, but dropped everything the moment he saw the sparkle in her eyes. My mom is coming home, Emma said, almost breathless with a huge smile. James stood up, sharing her joy, and pulled her into a tight embrace. That's incredible, Emma. I knew this day would come. I want to bring her home as soon as possible. I'm so excited, James, she said, trying to contain her excitement. And I want to be there with you. Let's do it together. Emma hesitated, but knew his presence would make the day even more special. On Saturday, they went to the hospital. Emma couldn't hide her excitement as she walked down the hallways with James. When they reached Margaret's room, she greeted them with a radiant smile. My girl, Margaret said, extending her arms to Emma. Emma ran to hug her while James stood by, watching warmly. And this is the gentleman who doesn't leave my daughter's side, Margaret said, teasing as she cast an inquisitive look at James. I'm just doing my duty, Margaret, James replied with a warm smile. With care and James's help, they brought Margaret home. Emma arranged everything to ensure her mother's utmost comfort. In the days that followed, Margaret showed surprising improvement. She joked that James was taking better care of her than Emma. You're stealing my place, James, Margaret said as he served her tea. I'm just making sure you're well enough to keep winning at cards, he replied, drawing laughter. The time together created an even stronger bond between James and Margaret, which warmed Emma's heart. Months later, James planned something special for Emma without her suspecting. One night, he asked her to take the weekend off, insisting he needed her rested for a surprise. Intrigued, Emma agreed. On Saturday, James took her to a secluded beach. The sky was painted in orange hues by the sunset, and the breeze was gentle. He led her along a path to a gazebo, decorated with delicate lights and flower petals. A table was set with wine glasses and candles swaying in the wind. James, what is all this? Emma asked, stunned by the beauty of the place. He didn't answer immediately. He just held her hand and led her to the table. After dinner, as they talked about the future, James stood up visibly emotional. Emma, all this is to show how special you are to me. You've changed my life in ways I can't even count. He held her hand, then knelt down. I don't want to spend another day without you by my side. Will you marry me? Emma put her hands over her face, surprised and emotional. Tears flowed freely as she said, Yes, James. Yes, 1,000 times. Yes. James slipped a delicate ring on her finger before standing and kissing her. The moment felt like a dream, but it was real, and they both knew it was just the beginning of something even greater. Months later, Emma and James stood at the altar. The wedding day had been carefully planned, with every detail reflecting the love and journey they had shared. Emma looked stunning in her white dress, while James waited at the altar, unable to contain his smile as he saw her. Margaret, sitting in the front row, watched with tears in her eyes. To her, that moment was a miracle, something she never imagined she'd live to see. My daughter found someone who loves her the way she deserves, Margaret said to Lily, who was sitting next to her. When Emma reached James at the altar, they exchanged looks that said more than any words. The vows they shared brought tears to the guest's eyes. Emma, you've taught me what true love is. I promise to be by your side in every moment, to support you, to love you, and to respect you. Today I give you my heart, James said, his voice full of emotion. James, you came into my life unexpectedly, but brought light, strength, and love. I promise to love you with all that I am and to face life with you, no matter what comes our way, Emma responded, tears streaming down her face. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was followed by warm applause. The reception was a joyful celebration, filled with heartfelt speeches and dancing that lasted into the night. Margaret, watching Emma and James dance under the soft lights, felt a peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. Her daughter was happy, fulfilled, and loved. It was all she had ever dreamed of. Years later, Emma and James would look back on that day as the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. They built a family based on love, partnership, and respect, and whenever they faced challenges, they remembered how it all started, with an unexpected encounter that completely transformed their lives. Their story was proof that true love isn't perfect, but it's unbreakable when built with sincerity, effort, and dedication. Do you think Emma was right to forgive James? Share your thoughts in the comments. How would you rate this story on a scale from 0 to 10? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to follow all our stories. And don't forget to check out more emotional stories by clicking here on the end screen.